fun. Yeah.
So let's now pivot to our panel, what we're all here for. And again, great thanks to the panelists who have taken their Monday evening to join us, and really for all of the hard work that they've done over the course of the year and beyond to bring this legislation and these plans really to the public, to public awareness. So I'd like to introduce the panel. We're going to start first with Elmer Flores. Elmer is a Long Island organizer for RAPP, Releasing Aging People in Prison. He is an indivisible group leader and also a principal in a new Long Island grassroots group, which is called, what is it called, Elmer?
Sorry, we haven't announced yet, but
oh, okay, that's okay. Okay, it's coming. All right, very good. I'm sorry, I'm jumping the gun on that, but he's just he has his fingers in many social justice issues, which is terrific. Then following Elmer, Emelissa Curo. Good enough, I guess. Good enough. Okay, we'll talk about the Less is More New York Act, and then Terryl Dozier will be the final presenter on the People's Plan for Long Island about, what we really need to do to make criminal justice really have the emphasis on justice. So after each speak, you'll be able to answer some questions, and if you'd like, and Julie will monitor the chat. If you just put Stack in the chat, we'll go to you. And then, of course, we'll wind up with a moderated panel. So let's give a warm Zoom welcome to Elmer Flores.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks. Literally, it's very, very overwhelming right now. We're in the heat of the campaign. Like, we have 4 weeks to the end of legislative session, and essentially any bill that's out right now is basically game on what can be passed, what can't be passed, like what won't pass. We're really hopeful that about the parole justice bills, and I'm going to give you a lot of insight and background on those bills today. But I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Elmer Flores. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Long Island regional organizer with Release Aging People in Prison campaign. So I'll give you a little bit background on that. So Release Aging People in Prison is a grassroots legislative advocacy and organizing campaign that focuses on ending the mass incarceration of aging people in the New York State prison system. Many people ask, what is aging people in the New York State prison system? Aging people in the New York State prison system is considered people 55 years of age and above. And I'll go into deeper reasons as to why that age is the number that's considered aging in the system. But we primarily advocate for those people and the release of those people because there is a crisis brewing in the prison system where at the height of mass incarceration, you had heavy-handed sentencing, criminal laws that criminalize communities of color, and particularly laws that just criminalized outright, social conditions and health conditions like drug abuse, substance abuse, mental health conditions, so on and so forth. And so part of what we do is we're mobilizing because of the height of the mass incarceration. These heavy-handed sentences were given out to many, many people. And as a result, you have people in the New York State prison system that are languishing years beyond their minimum sentence, with no recourse afforded to them for potentially being released or being afforded freedom again. So what we do as a result is we're advocating for these bills. We are advocating for these bills called the Fair and Timely Parole Bill and the Elder Parole Bill. But as our campaign moved forward, we started to build a coalition called the People's Campaign for Parole Justice. And that is just similarly to our organization. We kept the same strategy forward. We're a grassroots coalition that is started by 15 organizations across New York State that work to promote fair and meaningful release opportunities for incarcerated people in the New York State prison system. The primary goals of our campaign are focused on decarceration and family reunification. We know for a fact that thousands of New Yorkers are serving brutally long prison terms as a result of our state's draconian sentencing laws that are rooted oftentimes in white supremacy and the parole process being plagued with racial biases that is designed to punitively punish someone for something that they did and resentence them rather than acknowledge that people are capable of change and growing and transformation. So in response to these realities, we created the People's Campaign for Parole Justice to advocate for the Fair and Timely Parole Bill and then the Elder Parole Bill. And these are bills that we're advocating for in the state legislative chamber, so in the state Senate and then in the state assembly. We advocate for these initiatives primarily, these questions are definitely going to come up, but we have no exclusions in our bills. And what that means is that no person is excluded for the offense that they committed. So, and we advocate for these initiatives because we believe the value and worth of each person is immeasurable. There's no way we can dictate that one life is more valuable than the next. We believe that no person is disposable and that no one should be defined by the worst thing that they've ever done. And regardless of the harm that people have caused, we know that people should not be set to a death sentence in prison because that is the equivalent of condoning the death penalty. And so a lot of our work is focused in believing that people are capable of redemption and transformation, believing that families, communities, and collective care are what going to be the solutions to dealing with harm in the carceral system. And we also recognize that prison sentences, albeit the long ones, don't allow for meaningful opportunities for release that keep us safe. They oftentimes, a lot of people go to the kind of reductive approach of dealing with harm, saying lock them up and throw the key away. But they never talk about, okay, why did you do what you did? What led you to that action, and what led you to end up in the carceral system? And so our focus is really on uprooting the culture that exists in New York State of permanent punishment and replacing it with a system that's focused on the intersection of healing, of justice, and accountability for all people involved. A part of our coalition, we have the support of nearly 300 plus organizations from across the state, many of them from Long Island, including Pierre. And to give you a good just kind of breakdown of the bills, the Elder Parole Bill would allow people that are incarcerated age 55 and older who have already served 15 or more years the opportunity to go before the parole board for a hearing. It does not guarantee presumptive release. It does not open up the floodgates, as people would, as the opposition would often say. But what it would do was just allow people that are serving life sentences, indeterminate life sentences, meaning that people that are just serving years and years and years of their life in prison and are never going to see an opportunity until the day after they die to go before the parole board, will now have an opportunity to just have their case heard. In line with that bill, we're advocating for the Fair and Timely Parole Bill, which will provide for more meaningful review opportunities for people that are incarcerated who are already parole eligible. This bill would change the standard of parole by centering release not on the original crime, but on the person's rehabilitation while incarcerated. So as it stands right now, the parole board, so let's say I'm someone that's justice impacted and I'm incarcerated. If I serve a sentence of 50 to life and I went in when I was 20, when I reach the age of 70 years of age, I will have the opportunity to technically go before the parole board. It doesn't guarantee that I will get a hearing. It just means that by law, I can go before the parole board, but the parole board is the one that sets the hearings for you. So that's the first step. Then the second step is you go before the parole board after those 50 years, you get a hearing, they deny you. And oftentimes what they will deny you for is the one thing that you cannot change. No matter what you did in prison, whether you went to school, whether you got your master's or bachelor's, whether you were a leader in your community, mentoring the youth to not fall into the same path that you did, they still will not value any of that. And they will always put the nature of the crime that you committed as the main exclusive reason to deny your release. And this is part of the problem that we're seeing. We're seeing people that committed heinous crimes. We're seeing people that committed offenses that oftentimes society would see as taboo, at 20 years of age, at 16 years of age, and they're still incarcerated when they're at 50 and 60 years of age. And as a result, you have a prison system that separates families, people that have kids, people that have loved ones, people that have family members, they don't ever get to see them. And then when they do get released, if they ever do, their family members want nothing to do with them because they literally left them at the most important times of their lives. And so the system is racist because the parole board, what they do is very, very grossly, if you will, is that they will look at the Black person that committed that murder, and then they will look at the white person that committed that same murder. And they did all the same, and they did all the same, they have all the same qualifications. They went to school, they were a faith leader, they did their part, they atoned for their mistakes that they made through faith or religion. The Black person will get denied at a larger rate compared to the white person. And as a result, that is why you have 47.9% of the New York State prison population just being Black. And then you have another 24.1% of that prison population being Latino. You add up that number, you add up those numbers, we're talking about 70% of the prison population are people of color. It does not add up. White people do not do less crime compared to Black and brown people. The reality here is that there is a ripple effect of trauma, and the system is not bringing about healing, nor is it bringing about rehabilitation for all the people involved. And part of the problem here is that the parole system has lost its way. If it was aligned with rehabilitation, people would not be languishing in their years beyond their minimum sentence. People would have an opportunity to have their case heard. Now, if they're not ready, if the parole board does not deem them ready to reenter society and they're not safe to reenter, then that's a different discussion. But what we're saying here is people need an opportunity to have their case heard rather than just being seen as face value. You committed this crime once in your life, you did this one bad thing, you're exiled. And I think that's part of the work that we're doing. And it gets more and more passionate for me as we go every day because I see the realities. I literally have one of our folks that left prison. Literally, they did not afford him dental care. He had literally his teeth were rotting outside of his mouth. And he had to come outside of the prison system and drop literally nearly 60K, which he does not have because he's on SSI, to get dental care. And then when I had to ask him a couple of times about his family, he told me straight up, like, my daughter works for this very, very important politician in DC. I would love to get to know her, but she doesn't want anything to do with me. This is what the prison system does to people. And yes, we know that on the other side of things, there are survivors, there are victims that are impacted by these crimes, and there needs to be justice for them too. There needs to be accountability. No one's saying that that's not the case. But the reality here is that we're not doing it the right way. We're not balancing justice and healing and accountability in a way that's going to uplift and deal with harm in the way it should be dealt with. So that's the advocacy work that we're doing. I just want to wrap up there because I don't know what my time is, Catherine, but I think that, that's part of the work that we're doing. And another part of our platform is advocating for a fair and fully staffed parole board, which I will touch on briefly, but that just means making sure that it's fully staffed up to 19 commissioners. There's only 16 commissioners right now, and making sure that it's represented by people of color, by social workers, by mental health professionals, by faith leaders, formerly incarcerated folks, people that understand why people do crime. But that's not legislation. That is just more a general advocacy point we do year round. So I just wanted to highlight that. But that's pretty much all I can say on the People's Campaign right now.
That's terrific. Thanks, Elmer. We appreciate it. And so if folks have questions for Elmer, please put stack in the chat. Julie's going to monitor that. Just one question. What call to action would you suggest that folks on this call take to help?
Sure. So we actually have an awesome toolkit for those that want to take action, and it does everything for you. Literally very, very forthcoming, very easy to use tool. It's by one of our partners, forward.us, but you just type in your name, your address, your zip, and your phone and your email, and it will not keep your info, but what it will do is it will populate the information, a script, an email script, and a tweet script, and a phone script, and it will have your assembly member and your state senator's name listed. So that way you don't have to go look them up or anything like that. It's pretty easy.
We have a question from Jerry. Jerry, you want to unmute and ask?
Okay. I'm wondering, Elmer, if you could talk a little bit about how the organizations that represent victims of crimes and how they feel about this legislation.
Yeah. So I know, so in terms of, so I guess the best way I could put this is we benefit from having advocacy support from the New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, among a couple others that I just cannot put the name on right now. But in terms of what we talk about when it comes to like survivor justice, I think part of it too here is that we have to acknowledge why people engage in crime. And I think a lot of it too is that crime is born out of poverty. It's born out of struggle. It's born out of just basic animalistic survival. And that's not to say that anyone is an animal in this situation. That's not what I mean, but more so in the fact that we're reduced to such struggle which is why it's predominantly happening in communities of color, but we're reduced to such struggle that we have resorted with no other options than what we need to do to survive, which for some people can be drug dealing. Some people it could have been robbery that went the wrong way. For some people, it could have been engaging in like financial crimes or et cetera, like what, it really varies. And I think part of it too is that criminal justice, there is no one answer to it all. There's no one answer to how we deal with crime, right? Look, I may be a victim of a crime personally. I actually have been in my lifetime. I've had my car stolen when I was doing Chinese food delivery, and literally it was one of my semesters at Stony Brook, and I literally had my MacBook and all my stuff in there that I was using for my semester to graduate at college. Like literally it was like life or death at that moment for me. That person ended up stealing my car. We ended up getting it back. It's a long story. I'm not going to get into it, but I personally do not feel that person needs to go rot away in a prison cell for decades because that person did some harm to me. People do things for whatever reasons they do them. I can't sit here and understand why. I could if I asked them, but I'm not going to go do that. But like sometimes it's up to each person individually to reflect and look inwards as to how they want to deal with crime and how they come to terms with it. Because it's a traumatic experience for both people, for the person doing the crime and for the person that was hurt by the crime. It's harm. And it goes both ways. And I think that's part of what we're trying to say is that we're really trying to find a new way of a new vision for dealing with crime, particularly for victims and for survivors. I know that, in one of our one-pagers, we listed a report by the Alliance for Safety and Justice reported that more than 60% of survivors indicate that they favor shorter prison sentence and more spending on prevention and rehabilitation programs, including education, mental health treatment, and drug treatment programs. And I think that's one part of dealing with the larger part of why crime happens. Crime, I also want to emphasize that, like, I think we think of crime and we think of like the picture that SVU or NCIS or any of these crime shows puts on for you, but it doesn't paint the broader picture of why crime happens. It's a complex, like it's really complicated. Like no one goes and says like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go off someone or I'm going to go rob this person. No one just willingly says that willy-nilly. It takes a complex set of emotions, reactions, mental health states, like where they are at financially, socially, economic, like, in terms of like their life. It takes a combination of different things for them to get to a point where they are going to be triggered to do something of that nature. And I think that's why we can't put a blanket over how we deal with crime. I think that's what we're trying to say here. And I think the mass carceral system has been so focused on just giving heavy-handed sentences to everyone that does the crime, particularly people of color, because a lot of it's discretion too by the judges, that it's disproportionately impacting communities of color compared to the white communities. And so that's not justice. That's biases in the system that we're trying to address. So I hope that answers your question to some extent.
We have time for one more, and it's a good one from Jackie. She asks, have any other states or communities enacted similar legislation? And what is the research on recidivism for people who have been released?
Awesome. So I want to say to your first question, Jackie, I actually do not have an answer for you. I don't want to make some bullshit up. Sorry for my French, but I will come back to you if you want. I'll leave my email in the chat. And if you follow up via email, I definitely would love, or I can send it back to Catherine and Jerry. But I actually would, from what I remember, and if I'm very, like, again, very, very lost memory here. But from what I remember, our campaign is not the first to advocate for something like these bills in the country. I think there's other states that have already enacted this. I could have sworn Chuck Levine actually said this the other day, where we're behind because other states already did this. So this is nothing new necessarily, but I can come back to you and get you specifics if that's helpful. In terms of your second question, so the recidivism rate for people that are 55 and older goes down to less than 2%. So we're talking, and I want to bear in mind with you all, because you all are in the East End, and East End pays a lot of taxes, from what I understand, every year to the state. I want you to keep in mind how much you're paying out of your pockets to keep one incarcerated person over the age of 55 locked up in New York State. You're paying $140,000 to $240,000 per person per year to keep that person locked up, when the research says that people 55 years and older have a recidivism rate of less than 2%, the lowest of any age cohort in the entire prison system. You boost that number up to 65, we're talking less than 1% recidivism rate. So we're locking people up in the name of public safety without actually listening to the science and the research behind why that's not the case and why that's actually very wrong. So I hope that was a little bit helpful, but I can always share more links and research on this. And to give you the source, that was from the Vera Institute.
Great. Hey, thanks so much, Elmer. We appreciate it. And when you get that information, you can send it to Jerry and myself, and we can pass it along to Jackie and other people who want to know. But, I really appreciate you going into some detail about, the motivation on why do people end up in prison, and because that's hugely important to keep in mind. And the fact that the system is just so racist it just cannot bear repeating often enough. And if anyone on this call hasn't read The New Jim Crow, you really need to come to my bookstore, get the book and read it. It's eye-opening. And it was even eye-opening to Michelle Alexander, the author of the book, to really find out how incredibly racist the system is throughout the country. So thank you. And now we're very happy to have with us this evening Emelissa Curo from the Less is More New York Act, another piece of legislation that's before the state to help people who are incarcerated. So Emelissa, please unmute yourself and let's give a nice warm welcome to Emelissa.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emelissa Curo, and I'm a member with the Catal Center for Equity, Health, and Justice. And here at Catal, our mission is to accelerate the process of social change to equity, health, and justice in our communities, develop effective leaders and groups, and to measure and evaluate the impact of our work. So the passing of the Less is More New York bill is very important to me because there are a lot of families from our communities that have loved ones in New York State prisons and jails, like myself. My son is currently incarcerated in one of the New York State prisons. And just like many others, he will be on parole when once released. So I feel like it is our duty to ensure that they're given a proper chance to reintegrate back into society and with their families. New York State incarcerates or reincarcerates more people for technical parole violations than any other state in the United States. So right now, there are about 5,000 people incarcerated in prison and jails across New York for a non-criminal technical parole violation. In addition, there are 35,000 people under active parole supervision that at any moment can have their lives disrupted by incarceration. So the Less is More New York bill, also known as the Community Supervision Revocation Reform Act, will fix the problem that currently exists within the parole system in New York State. So here are the 4 provisions of the bill. The first one is restricting the use of incarceration for technical parole violations. Incarceration will be eliminated as a sanction for most technical violations. Certain technical violations could still result in jail time, but it will be capped at a maximum of 30 days. Some examples of things that are considered a technical parole violation are testing positive for alcohol or any other illegal substance, being late for curfew, missing an appointment with their parole officer, and many more. And just so you know, as you can see, a technical parole violation is not a new criminal offense. The second one is bolstering due process. Rather than being automatically detained in local jails, people accused of a technical parole violation will be issued a written notice of violation with a date to appear in court and will remain at liberty for any hearings. People on parole accused of a new criminal offense will be afforded a recognizance hearing in a local criminal court before they are detained, and the standards of the bail reform statute will apply. This is very important, especially now during this pandemic, because people can be home instead of being detained at a local jail, waiting for a hearing, you know, and hopefully not catching COVID. And the third one is providing speedy hearings. People under community supervision shall be afforded a speedy adjudicatory hearing upon an alleged violation of their conditions of release. So for example, in New York City, someone who's on parole and is accused of an alleged technical parole violation is taken to Rikers Island, where they will spend an average of 60 days waiting for an administrative hearing, sometimes even more. And that's just too long. And so let me add to that, that the first people that passed away from COVID-19 at Rikers were there for just a technical parole violation. And here in Long Island, people are sent to either Nassau County Jail or Suffolk County Jail, and people are like almost begging to be moved out of there and to be sent to state prisons, believe it or not, because the conditions there are so bad in those jails. The fourth one is providing earned time credits. So people under community supervision will be eligible to earn a 30-day earned times credits reduction in their community supervision period for every period in which they do not violate a condition of supervision. So essentially, this will give people on parole the opportunity to get out of it faster, because it will cut their parole sentence in half. Oftentimes, we see how dysregulations that are put on people on parole impede on their ability to successfully reintegrate back into society, and they deserve a fair chance. Also, it is important to note that this provision is retroactive, meaning that thousands of people will be eligible to get off parole within 6 months after the bill gets passed. The lead sponsor for this bill is in the Senate is Brian Benjamin, and the bill number is S1144. It is currently in the Finance Committee, and we have 29 co-sponsors. In the Assembly, the lead sponsor is Assemblywoman Farah Sufrance-Forrest, and the bill number is 85576. It is in the Committee on Correction, and we have 59 co-sponsors. So we are working hard to grow this number, so please reach out to your own legislators to get them to sign on. And just so you know, incarcerating people for a non-criminal technical parole violation costs New York taxpayers well over $680 million per year. So we strongly believe that the money saved from this passage of this bill should be reinvested in communities that have been affected or impacted the most. And those are like, you know, communities that are made of Black and brown people, and also people with low socioeconomic backgrounds. In Nassau County, we spend about, because I'm from Nassau County, I live here, we spend about 7 million every year sending people back to prison for a technical parole violation. And in Suffolk County, more than 1 million every single year. So I just want to emphasize that people should not be incarcerated for a technical parole violation, especially during a pandemic, and especially because it's not a new criminal offense. And we have seen how many COVID outbreaks in various correctional facilities, they have put the lives of people that are incarcerated at risk. And we all know that the best way to protect our loved ones is through decarceration. So far, that's all I have, unless you want me to go into the next steps.
That's fantastic. And I noticed that Melanie dropped into the chat a fact sheet, which is great. I would ask the same thing, though, that I asked of Elmer, if there are tools. I mean, obviously, you told us to contact our particular legislators, but if there's any tools that are available that we could use, if you could drop that in the chat, that would be helpful. And anyone else who has some questions for Emelissa, please either drop it in the chat or post stack in the chat. Thanks.
Yeah, so the action tool it works the same way. You put in your information and you will send a pre-form message about less is more to your elected officials, and you can find that on lessismoreny.org. And also you can join us at our Less is More New York campaign update call this Wednesday, May 19th from 2:30 to 3:30. And there we will have members and coalition partners that will share the latest updates on the campaign. My colleague, Melanie, she will put the RSVP in the chat.
Great. We have a question and I'm going to bundle mine with it. First, do you know off the top of your head whether Fred Thiel from Assembly District 1 is a co-sponsor? And the other question is, are all the co-sponsors Democrats? Are there any Republicans?
There are Republicans, and we also have people like DAs that are also part of it as well that support the bill. So it's not just Democrats, it's also Republicans as well that they're supporting the bill.
And I can just jump in about the Fred Thiel. So he's not currently signed on as a co-sponsor. And also Assembly member, one second, I'm just pulling up my notes. Just give me 1 second. And also Assembly member Jean Pierre is also not signed on. So both of the Democratic Assembly members in Suffolk County are not on the bill. But like Emelissa mentioned, we don't have any Republican legislators on the bill, but we do have Republican law enforcement officials, which I think is even probably more impactful. For instance, even the Nassau County District Attorney is signed on. So yeah, but I can put my email in the chat if you want to follow up about any of the other Assembly members that you want to know about if they're on the bill or not. I'd be happy to answer those questions.
That's great. Everybody here I urge everybody here in CD1 to give Fred a call. Tell him you want him to be co-sponsors of the Less is More New York Act, as well as the legislation that Elmer discussed previously. We feel Fred's on the fence, and if we could just show him the kind of support that the bill has out east, that would really help him maybe cross over and be a co-sponsor. We're pretty optimistic he's going to actually sign on to support all of the bills. So any other questions for Emelissa? Julie, do you see any?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Thank you. Thank you so very much for bringing your knowledge to the room about this. And we'll hope to be able to help positively get effect and get the bill passed. I note that Elmer has an answer to a question that came up just a few minutes ago when he was on. So I'm going to pivot back to him and then we'll go to Terrell. Elmer, please.
I promise I won't take too much time. But to answer the initial question about what is the is there any other states or communities enacted with similar legislation? Yeah, so 16 other states, including others far more conservative than New York, including Mississippi, have versions of the elder parole bill enacted. And then for the fair and timely parole bill, several other states as well, including California and Michigan, have versions of fair and timely parole enacted. There's some nuances and differences to the bills in other states than in New York's. But I think, to be honest with you all, are the bills that we're advocating for here are the most far-reaching, the far most progressive bills that are in the country in terms of criminal justice reforms with the parole board system. So, you know, some states start their age at 55, some start at 50, but ours is actually pretty far-reaching compared to like the no carve-outs and moving forward, like advocating for all people in the system that are incarcerated.
Okay, great. Thanks for bringing that back, the answers back to us, Elmer. I mean, look, you know, we all have this myth that New York is like super liberal, and quite frankly, it's not the case, especially when it comes to incarceration. It's really shocking to see Mississippi and states like Texas ahead of us on a lot of different issues. And I think that there just hasn't been a lot of oxygen given to the issues until now. And that's why we're all here to learn about them, so we can, you know, spread the information out to a much broader population and say, you know, really enough is enough. Let's help these people. The prison system is about rehabilitation, it shouldn't be about punishment. And we need to do better. We just, as a society, need to do better. Okay, so, you know, and regarding how behind New York is in terms of criminal justice, let's just look at Long Island and the police force that we have and how justice is dealt with. And to illuminate that for us today is Terryl Dozier, who is one of the principals in the Long Island United to Transform Policing, who's come up with the police plan. So he's now going to talk about the police plan, explain it. It's, first of all, the plan is over 100 pages. It's remarkable. So he's probably not going to get into, you know, tremendous detail, but to bring us up to speed on it and what we can do in Suffolk County to help with their efforts to transform policing. So Terrell, please unmute yourself and help us learn.
Thank you, Catherine. As you mentioned, my name is Terrell Dozier. I'm a member of LI United to Transform Policing and Community Safety, a steering committee member. I would also be remiss to say that Elmer Flores is also a steering committee member. He does it all literally. So Elmer, after I speak, if there's anything I missed, please feel free to add anything. So to begin this story, we have to begin with the murder of George Floyd, right? At least this portion of the story. And with that murder, we saw the collective outrage across the United States and really across the world as it relates to that senseless act. And in Long Island, we also felt that way. And we felt that way because of the historic killings that we had seen even on the island, killings of Matthew Felix, Kenny Lazo, the beating of Akbar Rogers, the Newsday exposés that recently came out as it related to the videos in Nassau showing the accounts of situations in which video cameras differed from police reports, or even in Suffolk County with the most recent horrific Christopher Cruz case and the use of force that was used against handcuffed Mr. Cruz while other officers watched. So we recognize that there are these issues that are on Long Island that we need to correct because we ourselves face harassment and brutality at the hands of the state, and that's uncalled for. And for this reason, Governor Cuomo issued Executive Order 203. And that order, for those who don't know, said that every single police department in the state of New York had to issue a reimagining policing plan, a police reform plan, to be sent to the governor by April 1st. And if they did not, they may be at risk of receiving state funds to the police department. And so we came together, LI United, with a couple of other coalitions, our sister coalitions, to develop the People's Plan. Those coalitions are Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability and United for Justice and Policing Long Island. That latter one has been working specifically in Suffolk County for a number of years since the Department of Justice settlement agreement that occurred in 2014. In addition, we brought other partners together. So we had Gender Equality New York that worked on transgender and gender expansive people's rights. We had Long Island Language Advocates Coalition, LILAC, that worked on language access in policing. And we came together and we developed this People's Plan. The People's Plan is just to generate a better vision for Long Island. Somehow the far right tries to make it seem like we're trying to demonize individual police, and that's not actually the case. What we are here to say is to simply say that the status quo is not serving all of our Long Island communities and meeting their needs. And so therefore we have a duty as citizens and as community members of this state, of these counties, to force our politicians to do better and force our institutions to do better. And we see that by the data. Nassau County, for example, is 5.3 times more likely to arrest Black community members than white community members. They are 3.9 times more likely to arrest Black community members when it's related to drug-related crimes versus white community members, even though all research across the United States shows that Black and white community members use and deal drugs at similar rates. In Suffolk County, the Suffolk County had issued the Finn report, which showed that as it related to traffic stops, Blacks are 4 times more likely to be stopped during a traffic stop. They're 2 times more likely to be searched than whites during a traffic stop. They're 3 times more likely to have physical force used against them during a traffic stop. And this disproportionate outcomes also exist among our Hispanic community members as well. And so the People's Plan just basically asks these 3 fundamental questions. One, who is positioned in our communities to respond to specific issues related to policing? 2, what are the responsibilities that police should have in our communities? And then 3, how should police be interacting with community members, and what oversight structures should be in place to ensure that policing is fair and exerts the minimal harm to our community members while achieving its aims. And so with that, LI United, our sister coalitions, we created work groups, people made up of experts in some areas and other people who were just everyday lay people, community members who said, I want to be a part of making the change. We created work groups and we did the necessary research. We talked to experts in different cities. We put months of time into researching proposals into what change can look like. And we developed what's called the People's Plan. It's made up of 12 sections and 20 proposals. There are a lot, so I can't go into the detail of any of them really, but I'll read off some of the names of just the sections that we have. It's a 310-page document. We have transforming crisis response, transforming traffic enforcement, transforming police accountability. We have hate crimes, transgender, intersex, and non-binary people's rights, the case for police-free schools, language access, building authentic trust and legitimacy within communities, technology and social media, hiring, training, and education, officer wellness and safety, and continued reinvention. And embedded within those, we outlined the key proposals that Nassau County and Suffolk County need to adopt in order to enter into the 21st century as it relates to policing. And we saw at the end of the day, we did see some wins, not enough that we're happy with, but more than what we had before. We saw commitments to improve policies and practices related to transgender and gender expansive people's rights. We saw new forms of data collection and reporting being adopted. Suffolk County since 2014 had a better system. They even said that they were going to adopt a dashboard so that communities can more easily digest the data that they collect. Nassau County had absolutely no system whatsoever for data collection, and it was pretty horrific. We saw improved oversight from legislative public safety committees, just saying that the police departments will go to the PSC more often. Unfortunately, we did not see the real robust police accountability measures that I think the community deserves, and it has to be a question about what is the rationale behind that. We saw a bolstering of crisis response from non-police institutions in Suffolk County, specifically really focusing on doing a dual response when mental health crises arise instead of just sending the police. Suffolk County did have already somewhat of a partnership with the Family Service League, and I know that they're trying to build and bolster that partnership now. And then also we saw a change, and this is pretty big in Suffolk County, a change in policy regarding consensual searches and traffic stops and limiting police ability to engage in fishing expeditions during a routine traffic stop. That was pretty big. And actually, I was the co-chair of the traffic enforcement work group. And fully honest, we did a lot of research, but I did not expect to really get that win. And I was very happy when we did. But we still have more to go with that arena, and I could talk to a little bit more about what that looks like as well. But we also, more importantly, we pushed the conversation on police accountability. There was a moment when they were doing the legislative meetings, the legislative hearing, and they were going to have people talk about what the community wanted to see. And every community member was given 3 minutes to give their say about what they wanted to see in police reform. And we had 4 hours and 51 minutes of community members coming up over and over and over again to say, we want to see the adoption of the People's Plan. And that was one of the most spectacular moments I've ever seen, in which everyone said that this is the type of plan we need for our communities. And so more than anything, the People's Plan was validated as an equal, if not even in many people's eyes, a better plan in response to Executive Order 203. And that showed that, there's that adage. It shows that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. And that's something that we really internalized in the organizing community. And so the charge that I would leave you all is that simply for Suffolk, as we know, Commissioner Hart left, is leaving, if not had already left, to be fully honest. I'm not certain what that date was. And so we need they're searching for a new commissioner, and we really need a commissioner that is someone who is open, who is experienced with bringing police reform in our communities. To my knowledge, Commissioner Hart was the first one that in a public forum stated that there was systemic racial disparities within policing, and we cannot afford to go backwards in Suffolk County as it relates to going back to saying that there isn't an issue. And I'll be fully honest, while we work with Nassau County, Commissioner Ryder got in front of the legislative hearing, and when told about the 5.4 times more likely to arrest Black community members than white community members, he just shrugged his shoulders and said, well, that's the data. Well, that's just the data, and we're just doing the arrests, even though we all know what that truly means about institutional systemic policies and racism in policing. We do not need that in Suffolk County. We need someone that's going to be able to continue to push the envelope and start to build a better vision of what policing can look like. So that's the charge that I would leave you. Also, if you ever want to be a part of this movement, you could go to www.liunited.org and join the coalition. We are expanding the number of work groups that we are having, and we have recently come together to pave a way forward with the new direction that we want to go upon. We're touching upon local elections. We're touching upon state level advocacy and developing partnerships at the state. Our own Elmer Flores is going to be leading that work group. We're doing things and building our internal infrastructure and making certain that we have an organizing community within the coalition. We're doing things of looking at budget justice and participatory budgeting and trying to bring that type of work to Long Island. So we're really trying to expand our scope. We have 54 organizations that are member organizations of the coalition. And, so we're really keeping this in the limelight and moving forward.
Wow. Thank you, Terrell. That was yeoman's work to get all the information in a short period of time. A lot to digest. I'm sure people will have questions. So again, please just put stack in the chat or the question. I wondered if you could you mentioned about the new police commissioner that the county is going to be doing a search for. I mean, exactly how do you see grassroots groups engaging? I mean, is there somebody out there that that's already been mentioned that we should be promoting?
To my knowledge, I haven't heard of anyone actually saying that there's a name out there that they've adopted. I know that there is a interim commissioner. I have asked people about him. I don't know much about him. I don't know if the component is that I believe he was actually the interim commissioner prior to Commissioner Hart coming on as well. So I don't know if that's going to be a permanent position for him. What I will say is that I think the most important thing, like I said, is to just call County Executive Balone, call your county legislature, and say that you want to have a commissioner who is going to respond and push the envelope as it relates to police reform, who understands that institutional racism has been a part of policing and that they need to work with the communities, with the community activists and reformers in Suffolk County to build a better vision of what policing can look like. So give those type of qualities. Someone who has had experience in their previous roles of bringing police reform to the police, to the cities, and bridging the gaps between the community and the police institutions.
Great. Thank you.
If someone else knows, though, if there's been a name that's been floated around, I'd love to be told that information if anyone has that.
Julie.
Well, I put my own question in first, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. So you mentioned that police accountability is the area where there's seemed to be the most resistance. What are like the top 3 reforms or so, 3 or so that would be most urgent, that would be most effective, that haven't been adopted yet?
Yeah, I would say the first one is a civilian complaint review board, the CCRB, a one with actual teeth. So one in which, we have civilians that make up a review board that are able to engage in investigations themselves. There have been plenty of issues with the police department's Internal Affairs Bureau as it relates to investigations that they engage in. That has not changed. If you read the Suffolk County police, Suffolk County's plan, they now have police accountability going to the Human Rights Commission, but they can take complaints, but investigations still are placed directly in the hands of the police IAB. And there are reports in which the IAB has coached police on what to say. There are reports in which the IAB has failed to interview witnesses or even interview the complainants. So we know that, and definitely not have timely investigations occur. So, there are a lot of issues with the police engaging in their own investigations. So putting that in a civilian complaint review board would be tremendous. It would also, and then saying that they get to have a significant determination on the disciplinary action that will be binding on the police commissioner to engage in that work. Another reform that we were pushing for was an inspector general, a police inspector general who has oversight abilities of the police departments, being able to look at their data, look at their trends, make certain that their policies and practices are not inflicting undue racial harm on specific communities, or undue harm on specific communities, and who can also, subpoena if necessary, records and personnel, et cetera. And then I would say, finally, one of the big ones is the right to know. Unfortunately, we have not. The Suffolk County plan says they have the Right to Know Act. It's not truly right to know because they don't tell the person who they're pulling over what is the rationale for why they are stopped. To me, that is just a basic human right that should be given to anybody who's stopped with. If you stop me for a traffic stop and even if you don't give me a written warning, you just want to stop me and say something specific, you have to give me some type of written card with your badge number, your name, and what was the rationale for why you stopped me. And if you search me, what is the rationale for why I was stopped, and what was the rationale for why I was searched if I wasn't arrested. So that is just very important to do. And unfortunately, Suffolk County has adopted the language right to know without actually implementing the actual policy of right to know. And so, yeah, those were the three that I would say are very important.
Great, thanks. We have a bunch of questions. And Melissa, why don't you just unmute and ask yours?
How do you feel about Nassau County Executive Laura Curran's position on the People's Plan? Because I know it was a little controversial.
Nassau County, I know this is a Suffolk group, but Nassau County really did not engage in a thorough process whatsoever as it related to their plan. It was a travesty. It was nothing less than a travesty. I was on one of the groups that were developing the People's Plan. I mean, their plan. I was on the CCT. So they had the PACT and the CCT. The CCT was supposed to be in developing, asking for data that can be utilized to understand the police footprint, and then being able to make recommendations that would go into their plan. The whole time that we were on that committee, we were told that we can't get any data. There was no data available to give to us. Even policies, we can't get the specific policies. They were giving us these very basic charts without detailed data that underlined what those charts actually meant. It was very rudimentary, to the point that then when they went public with their draft plan, we had not actually seen the plan that they had put out, and at that point we did a mass resignation, saying that we can no longer be complicit in the plan that you are putting out. You're utilizing our names to say that you worked with us, but you're not actually giving a good faith effort. Suffolk County had these hearings, 3-hour hearings. I think they had 8 of them, in which people could come to and speak their piece in 3-minute sections about what they want to see in the plan. Nassau County's equivalent was to have a Facebook Live in which they did 30-minute Facebook Live, 20 minutes, which would be a presenter, an organization or some group presenting to people, and then 10 minutes in which Laura Curran would cherry pick questions from the chat to ask the presenter. It really was preposterous. Laura Curran has gone on saying that she supports the People's Plan in some way or form, or we've taken components of the People's Plan into our plan, and they really haven't done much, if anything, as it relates to police reform. It's I don't know if Elmer, if you have anything to add, but it really has been a travesty of a position, something that is truly, I believe, hurt the community. And unfortunately, as a Democratic county executive, I think it's hurt her standing with her constituents, and often the progressives are the people who go out and really, go door to door, knock for you, tell people you really want to support this person, it'll be better. And I know in a lot of people's minds, people are wondering whether they're actually going to do that this year. If she wins, she wins, but not necessarily are a lot of people going to be putting a lot of weight towards her campaign.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add there for you is that behind closed doors in a meeting, I was doing RAPP work, but in a meeting with clergy leaders in Nassau, she was doing a Meet the Candidates event with these faith leaders, predominantly all Black and brown faith leaders. And she was just telling them like almost like straight up lies. Like I recorded the whole conversation because I was like, this is astounding that you can lie up through your teeth so easily. But she was saying like, oh, we got community input and support. I'm like, your entire board resigned. Like, did you leave that out? And then she was saying like, we have the most, forward thinking plan. And I'm like, all you did was implement body count. Like, I'm over here like rebuttaling everything she's saying in my head, but like these people, unfortunately, I don't think they knew better to be like, oh, this is what was really going on. So it just, yeah, Nassau was not it compared to Suffolk. So I just wanted to support Terrell's response there. But yeah, and she was there with the party chair, Jay Jacobs. And I think part of it too is just Jay Jacobs is very like against the defund language. And I guess they see our coalition with defund, which is not necessarily what we advocate for. I don't know if Terrell mentioned it, but we advocate for divesting, investing, and then transforming the system. But I mean, that's neither here nor there, just some context.
And just to clarify, like, I mean, what more can you say than there were 3 people who voted no to their plan being passed, and they were the 3 African-American county legislators on, it doesn't take much more than that to say how people felt about that plan.
Well, I'm glad that they got called out though, and that hopefully something gets done with that, because I was part of one of the Facebook lives that she did, and I agree with you. A lot of the questions were unanswered, a lot of them.
If you do want to call about that, an Attorney General, I didn't mention this earlier because I know this is a Suffolk group, but Attorney General Letitia James just said that she will be monitoring Nassau in regards to their lack of police accountability in their plan, and said that they need to, put more police oversight. So calling about your calling legislators in Nassau or the commission or the county executive about that and saying you need more police oversight is now the time to do that.
Great. Speaking back to Suffolk County, a question from Sandra. How is your coalition working with the new Suffolk County Hate Crimes Task Force? Is the task force including activists, or at least in conversation with activists?
Yeah, so we I don't know much about this, but we do have I know that the Hate Crimes Task Force is working with one of our sister organizations, PLI, United for Justice and Policing Long Island. I've done presentations to that task force. So I don't believe that there are members on our task force necessarily, but we work pretty close with the sister coalition, which provides some information to us, and they are working with that task force.
Okay, great. Jackie, do you want to ask your question?
I think she left.
Oh, all right. The question was, who actually hires the commissioner, and are there community members included in that process?
My understanding is that the county executive is responsible for hiring and appointing the commissioner. I have not heard about a search committee yet. Same way I have not heard about anyone mentioning a specific name. But if my information might be a little bit dated, that's one part of why I'm saying the charge would be to call and say that you would like community activists as part of the search committee, and a call saying that these are the qualities that we would want to see in a commissioner. Also, I know that Suffolk has a history of a search committee saying one name and then them going for another name, like the county executive alone saying, no, this is actually who we're going to appoint. So maybe a search committee isn't as important as just making your feelings felt as it relates to what type of commissioner you want to see.
And just to follow up on that, is there a petition as well, in addition to making calls to Boulogne or legislators? Do you know of any petitions you could sign?
I do not know of any, but that's a great idea. Elmer, maybe we need to bring that back. Our wonderful Elmer recently has written an op-ed that we're hoping to get published related to it. The three coalitions have sent a letter to the county executive regarding that request. But maybe a petition is also a good idea that we should jump on. So
Excellent. I think that's it from the chat.
I do want to add one real quick, not going to take more time. We do have an action item that we're just going to launch. You're the first to hear about it. So I guess this is like really good news. But it's a Nassau-based action, but you can take action and support to help us out on this. And it's demanding that Governor Cuomo reject Nassau County's flawed police plan. I've attached a toolkit in the link. If you open it, there's a toolkit with a phone number, emails on how you can take action for that. If you're not Nassau based and you want to send it to someone Nassau based, please do. But you're the first to hear about this, so have fun with it.
Wow, thanks. World premiere. We love that, Elmer. That's great. I just want to ask another question about the Citizens Review Board because, well, sort of two questions. Number one, Terrell, your impression of Bridget Fleming and where she was, because she is the legislator for a lot of the people on the call. But I had a conversation with her about the Citizens Review Board where she claimed they couldn't do it because of the police union. To be honest with you, I cannot remember the logic that she used, but you know, she was throwing that up as some sort of a defense for why the legislature couldn't move forward on that. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, I don't think it makes necessarily sense for why they couldn't do a CCRB. They could institute a CCRB. They might need to write it in county law and county policy to actually implement the CCRB. There would potentially need to be negotiation as it relates to the level of disciplinary power that a CCRB has, but that's just one specific point of it. As far as it relates to a CCRB engaging in an investigation instead of a police IAB or even doing it in tandem with the IAB, I don't see why that would forego an issue. So our coalition really isn't the legal entity of the three coalitions. Like I mentioned, we have a partner organization, Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability, who actually wrote a draft county charter or amendment to that would be adopted for the CCRB, and you would be able to find that actually in the People's Plan. So my understanding is that there would be no rationale or reason for why they couldn't have implemented a CCRB. Now, what makes a CCRB effective? If you do the research, you'll probably find that a lot of places say CCRBs aren't effective. We did have to build in certain components and characteristics in order to make it actually an effective institution. And one of those components is disciplinary power. So that might be something that they would need to go through some level of negotiation with the police union, but I don't think it was completely curtailed of them implementing some form of the CCRB.
Yeah, I think it was a disciplinary board or disciplinary actions that she kind of mentioned as a defense for that. And what about Bridget in general? Did you have much interaction with her? Any comments about her positions?
I did not have much interaction with her, so I can't speak to it. Elmer, do you have anything to say about that? Did you have any interaction with her?
No, unfortunately, I didn't meet too much with Bridget on this one. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's not one of the, we met a lot with Legislator Richburg. We met a lot with Kara Hahn, but we did not meet much with Bridget, to know.
So mentioning Kara Hahn, I'm curious if you could just talk about where she was in that, because her name's floated as a potential CD1 candidate.
She, I felt like, was much more open to many of the reforms. In fact, her and Legislator Richburg, my understanding, is working on codifying many of the reforms and that they did adopt and figuring out how they can be implemented with as much leeway as possible, I should say, to be codified in legislation. So I think that she has been pretty pretty open to the reform. She's been working with my fiance's Emily Kaufman, who was supposed to be on this call with me but couldn't make it. And Emily has been leading the alternate crisis response work. And so she has been working pretty hand in hand with Kara Hahn as it relates to codifying some of that alternate crisis response work and bolstering funds that are going to places such as the Family Service League or other organizations so that they can do more dual response or more individual response to people serving with public health and mental health crises. So she was definitely seen more as one of the partners in our search for police reform.
Do you see a couple more questions in the chat, Julie?
No, I think that's it from the chat. So we can move on to sort of the panel discussion.
I do see that there's a question from Eva in the chat though. I don't know if Terrell, Terrence, I don't know too much about this, but I don't think there was too much intersection of jail treatments in the jail systems with regard to the police reform work that we were doing.
No, not yet. Not yet. We didn't really do much intersectional work on that. Elmer and I have spoke about, at some point in time, we're definitely going to want to expand into that work, but also we recognize that we have a lot of people and partnerships already doing a lot of work. And so hopefully LI United at some point in time will be able to take on some of the causes that, RAPP and other organizations are doing.
Great. So let's, in the time we have remaining, it'd be great to hear from each of you about sort of forward movement. I mean, first of all, I just want to step back and say one thing the pandemic has assisted Long Island with, from our perspective, is it's really brought the East and the West together because we have been able to meet on Zoom like we are today. And I think it's been able to, it has enabled us to learn so much more about what's happening throughout the entire length of Long Island to the betterment of our grassroots movement. So I wondered if each of you could talk about maybe how the campaign that you're currently working on has made great strides in designing an organization that may have a structure that can be either replicated for other fights going forward, or let's say the next step of moving forward on the legislation that you're working for. So in other words, if there's any way you see kind of any tools that you have been created over the past year in your efforts that can be used going forward in other efforts. Does that make sense? So, and if any one of you want to hop in and talk about that, and you're welcome to. And perhaps a simpler question would be to ask what obstacles you've seen over the last year in your efforts and how you might have either effectively overcome them or are working on overcoming them.
Well, I will say, like, me personally, the obstacle that I have encountered has been being able to have my senator publicly co-sponsor the bill, even though he supports it. And he says, and he promised that he will vote for it once it's brought up on the floor. So because during the past elections, he was heavily targeted by the PBA. So, because of his stand on the criminal justice system. So he fears backlash and political concerns and stuff like that. So what I did, I sent him multiple emails, I made calls to his office, and we actually met with him and his staff a few times. And he suggested that we reach out to Nassau County DA, and we did. He said, try to get in contact with her because I feel like I'm alone on this island if I support you publicly. So he was like, can you try to contact her or other people or their senators? And, so we did, and she actually now supports the bill. And I think that was something positive that came out of that, that we got her support. And we also have now Senator Todd Kaminsky and Senator James Skofield, who promised to vote for the bill once it's on the floor. So we're hoping that this will encourage Senator Kevin Thomas to co-sponsor the bill.
So great. So Kevin Thomas is your legislator.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So the PBA, that's a challenging, for a lot of Long Island legislators. Anyway, Terrell or Elmer, how have you dealt with this same sort of circumstance?
Very, very much so. The PBA has definitely been an issue, both in Nassau and Suffolk, particularly Suffolk, and trying to get any movement on police reform. We really haven't yet developed the necessary solution to overcome that. It's very powerful. It's a very powerful entity in Suffolk. The one thing that I would say is the way that we've tried to overcome it is by getting more and more people to come out and show their mass support, and really letting candidates know, or potential candidates who are in office, right, know that if they're not voting in a way that's in benefit of all communities, that they won't have the type of support that they need in order to survive elections. So they might be being able to pattern their coffers with the PBA money, but they really need people on the ground, the boots on the ground, supporting their campaigns. And so that's one way. We are building now. Like I said, we have a local elections committee, and that local elections committee is building a systems by which we could try to ensure that candidates take, I would say, less PBA funds, and try to pressure them to adopt a police reform friendly platform in their candidacy. So.
A quick question to that, Terrell, if I might. Did you reach out to any, let's say, retired policemen to work on the People's Plan?
So we had retired policemen and former police officers in the coalition, specifically as members of Long Island Advocates for Police Accountability. LI United also had a partnership with Center for Policing Equity, which is Dr. Philip Goff's institution. It's the largest, it's one of the biggest national institutions as it relates to police reform in the States. And so, yeah, we had worked with police experts in that field as it related to building out the People's Plan.
Terrific. I would imagine that was very helppful.
Yes, and like we actually reached out to various institutions. I'm forgetting the association's name now, but it was, so I'm not going to say it correctly, but I believe it was like a Hispanic association for police that that supported and endorsed the People's Plan, as well as, I want to say, Noble, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, that endorsed the People's Plan.
Great. Great. Julie, did you have a question?
You mean Jerry?
I heard someone's voice. I thought it was Julie. Jerry, do you have a question? Oh, I see your hand up, and you're
Terrell, yeah, I just wanted to clarify. You said Suffolk County is particularly difficult, the PBA in Suffolk?
Yeah, the Suffolk County PBA, I mean, Suffolk County, I think, as the New York Times expose came out, Suffolk County is a very, I don't know how to say, police-friendly county. And so the PBA there provides a lot of support to both Democratic and Republican candidates. I think there's a lot talking about, I want to say, for like the overall police law enforcement unions, not direct funds, because that would be illegal, though there have been some illegal funds going to various campaigns or illegal measures of getting funding from from people in unions. But I want to say that $800,000 have been going to County Executive Balone via PACs, law enforcement PACs, for his candidacy. So things of that nature. The legislatures, both Republican and Democrat, have taken significant funds from the PBA. So that has been a major hurdle when people see their purse impacted by their policies. Of course, all of the legislators and all candidates say it doesn't affect their policies. It's hard to believe that. It's hard to believe.
And you feel that to that extent, it does not exist in Nassau County?
My understanding is that the Nassau PBA does not provide at least the same level of funds to the Democratic minority of at the legislature. Now, my understanding could be off. I don't know. Elmer at one point was leading our No Cop Money campaign, so he would have a better understanding than me of whether the degree of funds going in Nassau.
The degree of funds, I mean, in the county, there's a reason they're not going to invest in Democrats, given that the only Democrats there are for the most part conservative. And then even then you're left with the 3 Black legislators that it makes no sense to invest. It's money misused. So for them in Suffolk, they have to make that investment because Democrats retain control of the legislature. So they have to actively invest in the campaigns of those Democrats to thwart any progressive or forward-thinking legislation changes or reforms to the way policing happens. In Nassau, they have such a grip on the legislature that they can effectively play Curran's hand. And that, for all we know, look, we can be talking all this, bad ill will about Curran, but for all we know, a lot of people often feel like she did the best that she could, which I don't think she did, but people are saying that. And oftentimes I can't only imagine that it has to do a lot with the influence and that the PBA has on the people in the legislature that are going to push her. So I wouldn't say that they have direct control in terms of contributions to the county legislators in Nassau, but it's because there's a difference in dynamics and political leanings. And if you look at the state, the Long Island 5, Todd Kaminsky is the one with the longest track record of and the most amount of contributions being given to him for by the PBA unions and their PACs. So this is not just Nassau or Suffolk, it's across different levels of government and across different counties and parts of the country. And it all has to do with the fact that the PBA, the way they work, oh my God, I'm going to go in forever for this, but the way they work is that, look, in Suffolk County, they have body cameras, right? They say, county executive loans, we're going to implement body cameras for free. They're like, no, you're not doing that because we need to go into contract negotiations because they're a union. They have to get their contract process in there. So they say, no, we're not doing this for free. You're going to give us a stipend. And they're going to be like, why the hell would I pay you to be accountable to your own job? And then they're going to be like, because Nassau over there gave a 3.5% stipend to cops for body cameras. So therefore you have to give me similar stipulations, if not more. And that is how they do interest arbitration. And this is all stemmed, and it started in New York City and started in the big cities across the country. And that is how the PBA has been growing their influence little by little in their power and and basically the salaries of cops. And what they do now is the PBA is a national organization. It's literally a fraternity, if you really put it into terms. And what they do is if County Executive Balone wants to go to war with the PBA, the PBA, the local Suffolk PBA will be like, look, we need the state PBA to step in. The state PBA will get the funds from the state to send in the legal team to fight the county. Who's going to lose out on that? Not the PBA. It's going to be us, the taxpayers, because we don't have endless money to give to legal battles, but the PBA does. And so for that reason, we're in this never-ending battle of like, how do we destroy the damn PBA, and not destroy them, but more so destroy their power, their over power structure. We do believe in collective bargaining. I think all occupations have the right to collectively bargain, but we also think there's a level of what can be collectively bargained and what isn't part of the process. I hope that provided a little bit more insight.
Yes, thank you, Elmer. And look, you know, Long Island is a challenging place to live. And, you know, but what I hear tonight is that there's a lot of energy and a lot of good work that's gone into trying to make it more just as a community, though the road is long ahead of us. We're now past 8. I'd like to ask maybe each of the 3 of you, if you want to just close with repeating the action that you'd like us to take, so we'll have it all fresh in our minds. And I'm going to copy the chat and send it to everybody who came here tonight, because there's just, you know, such rich resource materials in there. I want to make sure that you all have that for you. So and Melissa, maybe would you like to start us off and tell us again what you'd like us to do to help you with Less is More New York?
Sure. So you can help us to push for this bill by taking our online action tool. It takes less than 5 minutes to put your information in, and it will send a preformed message about Less is More New York to your elected officials. I did it, my family and my friends did it. And today I encourage you all to do the same thing so that we can ensure that this bill is passed. So you can find this tool on lessismoreny.org. Also, you can join us at our Less is More NY update campaign call this Wednesday, May 19, from 2:30 to 3:30. And also you can join us for our Less is More New York date of action on Wednesday, May 19 from 11:30 to 12:30. Where we'll be virtually in community with each with each other, making calls to key legislators to talk about Less is More New York, and everyone is welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Elmer, how about you next?
Sure. So you're just going to throw it in here. The first one is the Pro Justice Toolkit. Very similar to how Melissa said it. It's literally a tool. You type in your info and it pre-populates everything for you. So you can send an email, a tweet, and a phone call all in one go with the script and everything set up for you. So you don't have to like really research or do anything crazy. The second thing I just want to plug in, we have our membership meeting this Thursday. So if you're interested in just learning more, like, look, you don't have to be impacted by incarceration to know that there's something wrong with the system. And I feel like a lot of people that are not impacted on are always weary to get involved in this work because it's very daunting. It's very overwhelming. And if you're not justice involved, then you're not going to be like passionate about it. But once you start learning little by little, I'm telling you, the atrocities and the things that you hear, the stories, that the horrors behind bars that you hear about people dying or being mistreated or just outright being disrespected and disregarded, it just mobilizes you to do something. It really does. So honestly, I encourage you, if you all at the membership meeting, that's when you will meet a lot of our impacted folks, people that are really, really care about this work. They're really like fighting day and night for it because they got people in prison that are, you know, serving time, or they, you know, they've done it themselves and they've changed their lives and they want better for everyone else. So yeah, that's pretty much the 2 actions we got. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time again. And thank you, Pierre, Catherine, Jerry, and the other Catherine, wherever you are. I don't know if she's here anymore, but yes.
Great. Thank you, Elmer. Terrell, please.
Yes, so quickly, as Elmer mentioned and put in the chat, I'll put in the chat now. If you would like for Nassau County, please call Governor Cuomo or Nassau County legislators to say that, you know, the police reform plan is flawed, for Governor Cuomo to say to reject the Nassau police reform plan, for the legislators to say that you need to improve police oversight. For Suffolk, please call the county executive Balone regarding the replacement of Commissioner Hart and making certain that there's a commissioner that is friendly towards police reform, that has experience in this way, and that acknowledges systemic racism and institutional policing, is systemic racism in policing. And then please, 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 if you're motivated by this issue, join LI United at www.liunited.org. We have 13 work groups made up of people all over Long Island to build out this movement. And we've been telling people you don't have to do everything, just pick one and work on that. So, yeah.
Can I just say something very quickly? I just want to say that, like, people always think that is not going to happen to them, and that's what we thought, like, you know, that something like this was never going to happen to us, and it happened to us, and that's how I got involved, and that's why I'm so passionate, because, you know, it's directly affecting me and my son. So, you know, we all need to get together, all these organizations, we all need to get together and stick together, because we need to end mass incarceration, because it's destroying families completely. And, you know, I just want to say thank you to everyone.
You know, and Melissa, thank you. I mean, the personal story is so profoundly moving, and I wish the best for your family and for your son. And I hope he's home and out for good soon, very soon. And, you know, we're all united, even though a lot of people on this call might be on the East End. I mean, we really have to have the mentality that we are, you know, we are all one community. And so, you know, call Cuomo about what's happening in Nassau County. Really, it'll only take a couple of minutes. And it really will, what happens in Nassau affects what happens in Suffolk, one way or the other. So be sure to take the time to do that. The three of you are, you know, you're doing God's works, you're doing good work. We so appreciate the energy and the time and the effort that you put into it. And Peer is here supporting you. Just keep us posted on what you need from us, and we will, you know, do what we can to help you going forward. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Save the chat if you want. I'll email it to everybody. And this has been recorded and I'll post it on our channel. Please share it broadly and widely. Okay, everybody can unmute yourself if you want to just give everybody a clap. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
Terrell,
Thank
Elmer.
you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.